I'm going to show you today how I make a beef bourguignon. There's quite a lot of ingredients that go on, but the great thing about making a stew or a slow braise is that you can prepare it ahead of time and then just warm it up later. And it's one of those dishes that tastes better almost if you make it a day or two ahead. Gives all those flavours time to mingle and it gives the meat time to soften. So it's a great prepare ahead dish. A braise, just so you know, is when you cook something submerged in a liquid, and you can lose non-prime cuts of meat, so you can use, a part of the working part of the animal, and that means when you cook it low and slow, the connective tissue and all of that melts. You must make sure you do cook it slow, so about 140 degrees centigrade. You want it as a bare simmer, and that is how you break down those connective tissues and the collagen and stuff. And that is what makes the meat soft. If you boil it, you won't get that. So off we go. So first of all, what we're going to do is do our mise en place, get everything ready. I've done a lot of it, but I'm going to chop the veg. So I've got my carrots and I'm just going to give them a wash. So here are my washed carrots. Carrots come in all sorts of different sizes, so these are 2 medium-sized ones. Pay attention to the recipe. I'm going to cut it down the centre, holding it between your fingers and thumb, creating a little mini bridge. The idea is to create some small cubes and then lay the 2 halves cut side down for cutting into strips. And then you can line them up with the end of your knife and chop, creating some small cubes. Taking care to watch out for the fingers on your securing hand. I chop the top and the tail off. And then do the same with the second carrot. So that's the carrot. Set aside in a large bowl. Now for my leek. I'm going to cut it in half lengthways. So I'm going to take that to wash. Separate the leaves. Make sure you get out any mud. They're grown in really sandy soil so they can grow straight, and this is the soil that can get stuck between those leaves. Give it a shake. So I've got my leeks. I'm just going to chop off the fibrous top tip, and I'll keep those and use them in stock. Now I'm going to finely slice. I sliced mine about 3 or 4 millimetres wide, so they're not very thick at all. And these can go in with the carrots. So now I'm going to crush some garlic. Take off the cloves. Remove the ends. Crush under the side of your knife and then peel off the skin. Crush them in with your other veg. Garlic is really sticky because of the sugar content. I like to use the bits left behind in the crusher, so I'm going to add these to the bowl as well. I'm going to finally chop my onions next. Through the centre, top to toe, skins back. But don't worry if the skins fall off. And chop. They can go in with everything else. Onions are always the last because they make me cry so much. If, like me, you have a sensitivity to onions, I'm crying, I'm just going to pop a lid on them and go and wash my board so I get rid of all that acid. So I've got my mise en place done, and now I'm going to fry off my lardons. oil in the pan. Not too much because lardons have got their own oil. And we're going to cook those until they're just a little bit golden. So all the fat is beginning to render out and they're beginning to go a little bit golden, which is what you want. When bacon cooks, the sound changes as the water evaporates and it begins to brown. So that's ready. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set everything aside in a bowl. So get a nice big bowl that will hold all the ingredients. And I'm going to use a slotted spoon to bring out the bacon, the lardons. Strain it of the excess oil. Now, depending on the lardons you use, you might have extra oil. And if you try and brown the meat in too much oil, it won't happen. So I'm just going to strain off a bit here. I've left a bit in the bottom of the pan. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to season my beef with salt and pepper. I'm pretty generous with my pepper. Some salt. Then I'm going to mix it all up with my hands. Perfect. Wash my hands. Okay, so I've got my seasoned meat. What I'm going to do next is sear it. To sear it means you need to get your pan hot, but not so hot the fond in the bottom burns that you've got from the bacon. And you need to do it in batches. So I'll do this in about 3 batches. So you want these gaps. That helps the meat brown and the steam evaporate. So what I'm going to do now is I've left it because you want it to brown. And it won't brown if you move it, but now it needs turning. Just want a little bit of caramelisation. It adds to the flavour. So at this point, it's now ready to add to my set-aside bowl with the bacon. And I'm going to scoop it out with the slotted spoon. Turning off my heat while I do it so that I don't burn the bottom of the pan. I am going to scrape off the fond as I do this if it comes off. At this point, I need to deglaze the bottom of the pan because the fond is getting quite dark and I don't want to burn it. So I just simply do with that with some water. Put the heat on. Splash some water in there. Let it boil up. Use a flat bottomed thing like a fish slice and just scrape that up. And then when it's all off the bottom, we're going to tip that into the meat. Perfect. Turn the heat on. Add some of the reserved lardon fat. Swirl it around the bottom of your pan. Let it heat up. Brown off all the meat in another couple of batches until you've cooked it all. And then transfer each batch to the bowl. And don't forget to deglaze the pan with a little water and scrape up all that lovely fond between each batch. going to do is we're going to sweat off the vegetables in the same pan. I need a little butter in there because the oil has all been used up with the meat. Tip in the veg. A little seasoning. Stir these around, get that butter to melt. And then what we're going to do is put a lid on so that they can sweat. Don't forget them. So keep an eye on your veg as you're cooking them. Lift the lid, there's a lot of steam in there, so watch out and let any excess water drip into the pan. Give them a stir. Scrape up and begin to scrape out any of that fond on the bottom. As they soften, it will loosen and you'll be able to do that. Make sure your heat isn't too hot. So I've let my veg sweat down for another couple of minutes on a nice low heat. These look great. The fonds come up from the bottom. Just to be sure, I'm going to give them a little taste. Hot. Perfection. They're soft and cooked through and seasoned perfectly. So into the pan, I am now going to put some of the beef and the stock and the wine and some herbs. This is the moment to add the bay leaf and also the dried thyme. And I'm also going to add some tomato puree. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it to a boil and stir it, and then we'll reduce it to a simmer and I'll put it in my oven. So it's now simmering away, and I'm all throughout, so there aren't just patches. And I'm going to pop it into an oven that's set at 140 degrees C. So I've got the meat in the oven, and that'll sit there for 2 hours. So I've got time now to prepare my mushrooms and my shallots, but I'm just going to clean down first. So what I'm going to do now is prepare my shallots. And the way I do that is I put them, dry skinned and all, into a saucepan. Then over these I pour some boiling water. Just until they're all floating in it, like that. Heat up full, lid on to bring them to the boil. So it's boiling in here. What I'm going to do is take the lid off, be careful, and just let them simmer for a minute. So once they've simmered for a couple of minutes, we're going to strain them off, and I'll show you how to peel them. Run them under cold water to cool them down. I even put cold water in my pan. That load chilled the pan, and now this lot will remain cold. So there are my cooked shallots. What I'm going to do now is peel them. Grab one, cut the top off, and peel back the skin. The reason to cook them is because it makes this process so much quicker. And then just cut off the end here, which are the roots, but not so much that they fall apart. You want to still keep them intact. So there's the last one. What I'm going to do is add some butter to that. Turn on the heat. So melt the butter, shake it all around. What we're going to do is add a sprinkle of sugar. And what that does is it just helps everything caramelise on the outside. Bit of seasoning. You can either do this on the stove top or you can put it into a hot oven. You've got the rest of your braise, your beef bourguignon in an oven. So if you've got a second one like I do, I finish these off in the oven. If you don't, you can equally do it on the hob here. The idea is to get a lovely caramelisation. They're coming on nicely. I'm going to turn that heat down a bit. That is done. Lovely and caramelised. So the next thing to prepare is our mushrooms. So I've got some button mushrooms here. It's nice to use small ones. If some of them are a bit too big, you might want to cut them in half. But what you do first is just dust off the dirt. So I've dusted off the dirt. I'm just going to have a look at them and see if any of them need cutting. That one. That one. You want them all to be roughly the same size. Next I'm going to put some butter in the pan, and when it foams we'll add the mushrooms. You need quite a bit of butter as the mushrooms will absorb a lot whilst they cook. Give them a shake and make sure the butter nicely coats them. I'm now going to put a bit of seasoning on them. Like the shallots, you want to cook them until they're caramelised on the outside. But they still need to be firm because you're going to put them into the beef. Use some tongs to turn them over as needed. So my mushrooms are now lovely and brown, and I'm going to tip them into the pan with my shallots. So my meat has been cooking for a couple of hours. I'm going to bring it out of the oven and I'm going to add my shallots and my mushrooms. Look at that, lovely. Smells good. Now keep the oven gloves on the handles because it's been in the oven, and that way you'll stay safe. Give it a bit of a stir. So that's looking and smelling great. Now at this stage what you can do is just thicken that sauce with a little cornflour slurry. To do that you need to measure out some cornflour. Traditionally I use arrowroot, but it's not so available now. With cold water, stir it in. Pour it in there. Then as that heats, it will thicken that sauce. In go the mushrooms and the shallots and any of that liquid there, any of that fond. Fond means flavour, but obviously not if it's burnt. Fantastic. Give it one more stir, then we'll pop it back in the oven. So my beef bourguignon is ready to come out of the oven. Oh, look at that, yum. Important to give it a taste. Let it cool. Oops. The meat needs to be meltingly soft. Yum. That is perfect. So what I'm going to do is pour it into this bowl. Scrape out all the bits. Pop those in there. Being careful of the handles, I'm going to put this to soak. So here's my beef bourguignon. It smells amazing. Just needs a little bit of those parsley leaves on the top. I'm just going to chop the leaves now. Rainbow technique, creating that arc. And then it is ready to serve with some mashed potatoes and some steamed green beans, or just simply a baguette.